While I was still a reservist in Buffalo, I had a number of summer opportunities. One was at Willow Grove. They transitioned from P2 to the P3, which is an aircraft that's a submarine hunter. I actually was filled in for the chaplain, so that was one of my first experiences to be by myself at a facility and learned quite a lot. Went on down to Norfolk for another and was supposed to be assisting the chaplains just in doing counseling, but encountered the commanding officer of an LPH of a helicopter carrier, and he invited me to go out on a shakedown cruise. So went out there, and the second day they decided that I needed to go by Holy Helo by helicopter. It's a Holy Helo if it's designated to get the chaplain from one ship to another. And so they brought me over to a small ship. As they were lowering me down, there's a lot of static electricity that builds up. And the person who has a glove and a hook with a cable that's grounded missed. And so I got zapped pretty well on there. Welcome to the Navy. But then they decided I was going to go to an oiler that had not seen a chaplain in quite some time. As the ships are parallel, going at some speed, they shoot a line across and pull over the hoses that refuel our ship. But then they hook up on cables what they call a bosun chair, which is just a metal frame that holds one person, and the crew has to then pull this thing across. They're usually not very happy that they have to be out in the open seas and do that. And so the person in the chair often is made very aware of their displeasure. But at the same time now, the ships aren't just going straight and even because of the swells. They tend to go this way. So as you go up, it's more taut and the chair goes up and sometimes spins. But as it comes down, then it's often dipped in the ocean and anything like oil that's floating on the ocean. So the captain of the ship to which I was being sent insisted I come over in my white uniform. By the time I got there, I looked like a muskrat being rescued after an oil spill. So he was very unhappy with me. And I had delayed his dinner in the wardroom. So someone else let me borrow his uniform. And I came in because I was late. He wanted me to demonstrate for everyone how a naval officer properly gives a toast using water. So usually the captain would sit in at one end of the long table and the executive officer at the other, but he had me sit in the XO's chair. As I stood to give the toast, we took a roll, which launched me down the table where an Italian meal had been laid out. And I cleared it with open arms into the lap of the captain, who unfortunately had no gene that was happy. So I felt sorry for the rest of the officers because they knew they would be very sorry if they laughed, but they were about to implode, trying not to. One of my greater, better experiences, welcome to the Navy. So after I went on active duty, I went to a cruiser, the Halsey in San Diego, and out on deployment there, and into the shipyards at Long Beach. And at that time, my father passed. And I had just a couple of days from the time I did his funeral then to come back, get my things from the ship, and be sent to Okinawa for a year unaccompanied with Marines. One of the things I particularly remember about that assignment, the day I arrived, I was being shown my office space, and there were two extra people there. One was a sergeant and one was a young Marine. And I thought maybe they were going to be volunteer assistants, but it turned out as soon as the colonel left, the sergeant told me that I had to give some information to the young man, which was a Red Cross message saying his father had died. So I thought that was rather a cruel introduction to Okinawa. But I was honest with the young man and said that I too had just lost my father and was still wrestling with that whole situation. My brother had been hit by a car years before, and we had prayed fervently, and he had recovered. But the same fervent prayers did nothing to keep my father alive. So the best I could do was offer to grieve with the young man, and we would watch out for each other. And as it turned out, that was probably a better way to deal with the situation than simply quoting scripture and praying. So we went from there. We were given a 48-hour warning notice and were sent to Korea. The North had dug tunnels under the DMZ, under the river, and DMZ meaning demilitarized zone, and they were prepared to invade. There were 58,000 Army in country at the time, but they decided one battalion landing team of about 1,400, it was 1,240 Marines, would be enough to deter them. So we were sent in. It was freezing. The ground was so cold that our entrenchment tools would bend as we tried to break the ground to make foxholes. But they put us in a helicopter, CH-46s, to fly us where the tunnel openings were. But mine, we call it a hard landing. Others might call it a crash. Went down some 26 miles from that. And I had a problem with my spine at that point, but we still had to hike 26 miles, and I wasn't going to have my Marines carry me, so we went and did that.
You're still having some...
So I still have some issues. The older I get, the more the follies of youth come and bite me. But after that time with Marines, I went to New London and was assigned to submarines. So I started with diesel boats and then went to the small nuclear subs. And in conversation with the admiral, told him that I would like to get qualified so that the troops knew that I understood the challenges of qualifying submarines. So there was going to be a shift in assignments anyway, and he agreed to send me out on a fleet ballistic missile submarine for a 3-month submerged patrol. So I went out and they created a qualification package for me. I completed that, which required that I talk to every person on the submarine about their job and have that closer relationship. So to my knowledge, I'm the only chaplain who's ever qualified in submarines as a chaplain. But that was one of the highlights of my career. And from there, then, wearing a patrol pin, they also made me some dolphins. They're one-of-a-kind dolphins. They filed down the one dolphin and made an angel wing, and then filed down the control tower and made a cross. So angel wing, dolphin, and cross. But then working with the 22 crews afterwards, that gave me a very different kind of relationship with them. There was literally a line out the door every day to talk with them. And then went on to a development squadron, one-of-a-kind submarines, and finally was commissioning the new Tridents. After that, I came to Hawaii and was chaplain for both the base chapel and the Family Service Center. My first introduction, other than a short visit on the ship in '76, which made me decide that if I ever could get assigned back here, this was it. So from there, I went to the Naval War College and the Chaplain's Advanced course in Newport, did the 9-month course and stayed on to teach at the basic course for 3 months. And from there was assigned as the command chaplain for the Carrier Ranger. And because the Admiral was aboard, I was also the battle group chaplain. So at that time, I mentioned we brought Bob Schuler out for, if I recall, the Martin Luther King celebration. But we also deployed to the Persian Gulf. And in that deployment, we had 18 ships, the largest carrier group since World War II. And in that carrier group was the USS Missouri. They were the point ship for us, so they would go out over the horizon and use their radars and scan for ships and submarines and such out there. Because the chaplain was injured on the Missouri, I went out on several occasions and had a chance to spend some time on the Missouri, talking with the crew, and was actually adopted by, they call it gun mount 1. So the first gun mount, those guns individually can fire cartridges that are the weight of a VW bug and would fire 23 miles with accuracy. So anyway, it was a very interesting time on there. That was when there were some first hostilities over in the Persian Gulf. And we did lose some pilots over there. After Ranger, I went to Naples, Italy, and ran the Navy's retreat program called Credo throughout all of Europe and kind of expanded that. A wonderful chance to do spiritual growth, personal growth, marriage enrichment, youth programs, parent, teen, etc. From there, went to the Marine Boot Camp, Marine Corps Recruit Depot in San Diego, and then back to Hawaii as the regimental chaplain. So the senior chaplain for 3 battalions and an artillery battalion and such. At that time, started doing some retreats that seemed to be helpful. So was asked then to develop the Credo program in Hawaii and did that, and actually got a facility of 11 buildings that the Seabees helped build here at Kaneohe Bay. And from there I retired. I was so used to putting in some long hours, I thought a 40-hour job would be part-time. So I did vocational rehab for the VA and did group sessions at night for Forensics and Behavioral Sciences Institute for sex abusers and substance abusers, and then taught social psychology at Hawaii Pacific University. Then I was asked to be the clinical coordinator for substance abuse at the Marine base, and a couple of years into that, the bishop asked me to start doing intentional interim, so I did 3 different ones here. And now I'm working full-time as a volunteer for a number of organizations that support veterans. So with the on the VA Institutional Review Board, consultant to the National Center for PTSD, on the Governor's Task Force for Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services, the military liaison for our Lutheran conference, and 3 or 4 other things. So I'm failing retirement, but feeling like everything now over the years has made me more capable of supporting our retired service members and some of the active duty folks as well. My junior Protestant chaplain had gone through CPE recently, and his supervisor contacted him and asked if they could bring the CPE supervisors who were there for a conference for a tour of the ship. We had quite a lot of things going on, and I agreed we would fit it in. And so they gathered them all up. We call it the forecastle. It's a big space where the chains from the anchor come in, but it was used for services. And so they asked me to come in and bring greetings. So as a commander, as the senior chaplain, I went in and they yelled attention on deck, and everybody stood up. And I go up to the podium and I hear this, "Oh my God, it's only Steve Jensen." I think, who is this person? It was Jack White. So Jack afterwards, we had a little bit of a conversation, but afterwards wrote a story for the seminary I'm sure you all can find. Talks about his tour there.